My name is Chanika. I'm 76 years old, and I want to begin tonight with something that took me most of my life to understand. Something that goes against almost everything the modern world has taught us about our own bodies, about healing, about what the body actually is and what it is actually capable of. For most of my adult life, I treated my body the way most people do, as a machine, as a tool I use to get through the day, as something that occasionally malfunctioned and needed to be fixed by someone who understood it better than I did. A doctor, a specialist, a prescription, something external, something outside of me that would correct what had gone wrong inside. And this approach worked sometimes, but it never addressed what was actually happening. It never asked why the body was struggling in the first place. It never considered that the body's symptoms might be communication rather than malfunction, that the pain, the tension, the fatigue, the recurring illness might not be random, might not be simply bad luck or bad genetics or the inevitable deterioration of age, might be the body speaking in the only language available to it about something that needed to change, something that no external intervention could change because it lived in the quality of how I was living. Japan has a relationship with the body and with healing that is unlike anything I had encountered before I began studying it in my late 50s. Not a relationship that rejects medicine. Japan has extraordinary medicine. But a relationship that understands something most Western approaches miss entirely. That the body is not separate from the mind, from the emotions, from the quality of your daily habits and your relationship with yourself and your relationship with nature. That healing is not something that is done to the body from the outside. It is something that the body does from the inside when the conditions are right. And the Japanese arts of healing, accumulated over centuries, are fundamentally about creating those conditions, about removing the obstacles that prevent the body's own extraordinary intelligence from doing what it was designed to do: heal, regulate, restore, renew. The first Japanese healing practice is one that has no direct translation in English. It is called Shinrin Yoku, forest bathing. Not hiking, not exercise in nature, bathing. Immersing yourself in the presence of trees with the deliberate intention of receiving what the forest offers. And what the forest offers, what decades of Japanese scientific research has now documented in measurable physiological terms, is extraordinary. Trees emit compounds called phytoncides, chemical substances they release into the air. When you breathe in these substances, when you truly breathe them in with slow and deliberate breath in the presence of trees, measurable changes occur in your body. Natural killer cell activity increases. These are the immune cells that identify and destroy cancer cells and virus-infected cells. Cortisol levels decrease. Blood pressure normalizes. Heart rate slows. the nervous system shifts from the sympathetic state to the parasympathetic, from fight or flight to rest and repair, from vigilance to restoration. And these changes, these real, measurable physiological changes, occur simply from being present in the forest, not doing anything, being there, receiving what is there. I began practicing Shinrin-yoku in my early 60s. I found a path through trees near my home, and I walked it 3 times a week. Not quickly, slowly, stopping often, breathing deliberately, touching the bark of trees, sitting on the ground sometimes, looking up through branches at the quality of light. And the changes in my body over the months that followed surprised me. Inflammation that had been chronic began to ease. Sleep that had been restless began to deepen. A persistent low-level anxiety that I had accepted as part of my temperament began to lift. Not because I willed any of these things, because I gave my body what it had been without for years, the presence of nature, the chemical intelligence of living trees, the kind of environment in which the human body evolved and for which it is still, despite everything, designed. The second practice is perhaps the most radical in its simplicity, and it is called Hara Hachi Bu, 8 parts stomach. The practice of eating until you are 80% full and stopping there. Not because of calorie restriction, not for weight management, because of what happens in the body when it is not perpetually processing more than it needs. When the digestive system is not constantly overwhelmed, when the energy that would go to processing excess is available for other things, for repair, for immune function, for the cellular maintenance that slows aging and prevents disease. This practice, observed in Okinawa for centuries, is one of the key factors researchers identify in populations with extraordinary longevity and remarkably low rates of chronic disease. Not genetics primarily. The practice of consistently eating less than the body's maximum capacity. I resisted this practice for years, not because it was difficult in any physical sense, because it required a quality of attention to my body while eating that I had never practiced. I had always eaten by external measures, by how much was on the plate, by when others stopped eating, by whether the food was finished. Never by listening to the actual signals my body was sending about what it needed and when it had enough. And learning to listen, to develop the sensitivity, to feel the difference between being 80% full and 100% full. To notice the subtle but real signal that the body sends when it has received enough, took months of practice. But it transformed my relationship not just with food, but with my body, because it was the first practice that required me to listen to the body rather than override it. And that listening, that quality of attention began to extend beyond eating into other areas, into noticing when I was tired before I was exhausted, when I was stressed before I was overwhelmed, when I needed something before the need became urgent. The body had always been sending these signals. I had simply never been trained to receive them. If something in what I'm sharing is opening a door in your understanding of your own body and its capacity, if you're beginning to see the intelligence that has been speaking to you in ways you haven't yet learned to hear, stay with me, because what comes next goes deeper still. And if this space is offering you something genuinely useful, come back to it. Return when your body begins to communicate and you want to understand what it is saying. The third practice is one that Japanese culture has refined into an art form over centuries. The practice of ofuro, the evening bath, not showering, not cleaning quickly and moving on. The deliberate, ritual, mindful practice of bathing in hot water as a daily act of care for the body. The Japanese ofuro is not primarily about hygiene. It is about transition, about creating a clear boundary between the activity of the day and the rest of the evening, about using the physiological effects of hot water immersion to prepare the body for deep sleep and genuine restoration. When you immerse your body in hot water, core body temperature rises. When you emerge and the temperature begins to drop, this cooling triggers the release of melatonin and signals the body that it is time to sleep. The nervous system downregulates, muscle tension releases, the mind, which has been racing through the problems and tasks of the day, begins to slow. And this is not metaphorical, it is measurable. The bodies of people who practice regular evening bathing show different cortisol rhythms, different sleep architecture, different rates of inflammatory response than bodies that do not. I began practicing evening bathing in my late 50s. Not soaking for hours, 20 minutes, in water hot enough to feel genuinely immersive. Without my phone, without a podcast or music or any input. Just the water and my body and the deliberate practice of being present to both. And what I discovered, what anyone who practices this consistently discovers, is that those 20 minutes become the most genuinely restoring part of the day. Not despite having nothing to distract from, because of it. Because the absence of distraction creates space for something that is almost never available in modern life. Genuine contact with your own body. Genuine feeling of what is actually there. The specific tensions, the specific fatigue, the specific places that need attention. And when you feel them, really feel them, the body responds. Not because you did anything to intervene, because you finally arrived in it. And arrival is what the body has been waiting for. The fourth practice is one that the Japanese understanding of health places at the very center of well-being. It is called ikigai, often translated as reason for being. The understanding that having a sense of purpose, a reason to get up in the morning, a contribution that feels genuinely meaningful, is not separate from physical health. It is one of the most powerful determinants of physical health there is. The research on ikigai and its relationship to longevity, immune function, cardiovascular health, and cognitive aging is extensive. People who have a clear sense of purpose live longer. They recover from illness faster. They have stronger immune function. They have lower rates of dementia. Not because purpose is magical, because a body that is living toward something worth living toward is a body that has reason to maintain itself, reason to heal, reason to continue. I discovered my ikigai late, not because it was hidden, because I had been too busy surviving to ask what I was surviving for. And when I finally asked, when I sat with the question long enough and honestly enough to hear a real answer, what emerged changed not just my sense of meaning, but my physical health. The chronic fatigue that had followed me for years began to lift, not all at once, but as I moved toward what actually mattered to me, as I organized more of my days around what I genuinely cared about, rather than what I felt obligated to maintain, my body began to cooperate in a way it hadn't for decades. As if it had been waiting for this direction, as if it had been holding something in reserve for the moment I chose a life worth the energy of sustaining. The fifth practice is one that Japanese medicine and philosophy have understood for centuries, and that Western medicine is only beginning to integrate. The practice of Ma. Space. Meaningful emptiness. The understanding that rest is not idleness, that the space between activities is not wasted time, that silence is not the absence of something, but the presence of something essential, and that a body that is never given genuine rest, never given the spaciousness of true stillness, never allowed to simply be without producing or performing or responding, is a body that cannot heal. Most people in the modern world do not rest. They stop. There is a difference. Stopping means the activity ceases. Resting means the body and mind enter a state of genuine stillness that allows repair to occur. Most of what we call rest is simply switching from one form of stimulation to another, from working to scrolling, from talking to watching. The nervous system never truly downregulates. The body never truly enters the state in which cellular repair, immune regulation, and hormonal restoration occur. And the result is a body that is perpetually behind on its maintenance, perpetually using inflammatory responses that should be temporary as chronic states, perpetually running on a depleted system that is doing its best but has never been given the conditions to fully restore. The practice is simple, but it requires something that modern life actively discourages: deliberate, regular, protected periods of genuine stillness. Not meditation necessarily, though that is one form. Any form of true stillness where the body is not being asked to do anything, the mind is not being fed any content, and the nervous system is allowed to simply be. 10 minutes in the morning, 10 in the evening, sitting in a chair, looking at the sky, feeling the ground under your feet, breathing slowly, doing nothing, being something. This is Ma. And for a body that has been denied it, returning to it can feel almost immediately like coming home. My name is Chanika. I'm 76 years old. I live in a small temple where these practices are not philosophies, but the texture of every day. Where Shinrin Yoku happens every morning on the path through the trees. Where Harahachibu is simply how everyone eats. Where Ofuro ends every evening. Where Ikigai is not a concept, but the actual reason each person is here. Where Ma is built into the structure of the day, the way silence is built into music. And I am healthier at 76 than I was at 50. Not because I have been lucky, because I have learned to create the conditions in which my body's own extraordinary healing intelligence can do its work. Not fixing the body from the outside, trusting the body from the inside, giving it what it has always needed and what it has almost always been denied. Presence, attention, nature, purpose, space, rest. The simple, profound, ancient, and immediately available conditions that the Japanese arts of healing have always known are the source of genuine, sustained, medicine-free health. The healing your body is capable of is not what you have been told it is. It is far more responsive, far more intelligent, far more available to you than any external intervention could provide. But it requires something from you in return. Not effort, attention. The quality of presence that says, I am here, I am listening, I am creating the conditions you need. And then trust. Trust that the body, given what it needs, will do what it has always known how to do. Given the chance, it heals. It always heals. You just have to get out of the way long enough to let it. Before we part, I want to know one thing. Which of these practices is your body asking for most urgently? Not which seems most interesting to you. Which does your body need right now? There is a difference. And if you listen, truly listen, you will feel it. Tell me in the comments, because naming what the body needs is often the first step toward giving it.